All right, so today we are talking about SBA, the pros and the cons, how it fits into the memory care mansions. And I'm using SBA, so I'm going to be sharing kind of two sides of this. The actual like SBA program, what are required, and then kind of a little bit more like what does my preferred lender require, which I think is a good starting place for you. It's not going to be across the board with every single SBA lender if you go with somebody else, but I'll kind of distinguish between the two different items: the SBA program, what's mandated, and then also what I am seeing is common in the marketplace for what actual banks are requiring above and beyond what the SBA program is. So first, I'm going to start by sharing my screen here, and let's actually take a look at the SBA website. There we go. Then we got me on the screen there. Okay. So it's literally just sba.gov, and you can find this. So there's two different programs, right? They have a 7A and a 504. And I'm going to talk mostly today about the 7A program, and I'll tell you, I guess, why. The 504 is very much similar to a commercial loan that you can get at just your local bank. And I've done a commercial loan at a local bank, and normal terms, 20% down, and they don't do any additional financing usually for some of these like interest reserves and lease up periods and FF&E. It's usually just they're going to be backed by the real estate exclusively, nothing to do with the business, and they'll lend on average about 80% loan to value. So the 504 is very similar to that. And so I'm not really going to get into that, but let's talk mostly today about the 7A. So you can see here, I'll just kind of overview some of the terms. So this is actually on the SBA's website. So here's what the actual program requires, what the SBA program requires, not what the bank that you're going to go through is going to require. So here's the framework for what the SBA program is, and then the bank will take that, comply with that, and then they have their own requirements on top of that. So I'll kind of unpack the two different things here. Let's see. So SBA loans. So this is great for what we want to do, because we can buy raw land or a building, and we can do a big, new construction, or we can do a big renovation. But this program will work for ground up builds or big renovations, and they will do construction draws and those kind of items. So let's see here. I want to go to... Okay, so let's see. So I did mention this. They will lend on the furniture, the fixtures, the supplies. They will lend, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but they will lend on the lease up reserves. So you'll have an interest only loan during construction, right? So you're not going to be paying principal, but potentially one of the advantages of using this SBA 7A program is that you can borrow the interest money while you are under construction. Now, let's say you're under construction for 12 or 15 months. And again, you're not going to be paying the whole thing. You'll be only paying interest on what you have borrowed thus far, right? So you may, month one borrow 20%, month two borrow 30%, month three borrow 35%, and so on all the way up. And maybe by month like 11 or 12, you borrowed the full 100%. And so you're going to be paying interest on what you have borrowed, which is great. You're not paying interest on the whole thing, but you can borrow that interest. So they'll go in on the front side and they'll put everything into a spreadsheet, a calculator, and they'll say, okay, well, here's where we're anticipating your construction schedule. This is how much we're anticipating your interest. And then, so now we can add that on to the loan, that much money. So potentially that whole construction time, you can borrow that money. And then in addition to that, you can even borrow lease up time. So maybe even 6 months. So potentially you may be able to finance an additional 18 or 24 months of interest payments that you are not actually paying. Now, there's pros and cons to this, right? Like it allows you to borrow more money, which means you have to either come out of pocket with less money or you have to raise less capital, but you are paying that, right? It's not free money. It does get added onto the principal balance of the loan. So we'll unpack that a little bit more, but that's one of the advantages for this, and it's clearly also a disadvantage because you're going to be borrowing more money. Let's see here. So let's talk about some of these things. This loan is a 25-year loan. So amortization is 25 years, not 30. So it will have a slightly higher payment as you're putting that into your calculator. And in addition to that, it can be like a 26-year loan or maybe even a 26.5-year loan because you may have 12 or 18 months of construction. And then once you go perm, once you're stabilized, then they'll start this 25-year term. So that's what it looks like, 25-year maturity. Okay, interest rates. So the SBA does have requirements for what is a minimum interest rate or a maximum interest rate, I should say, not minimum, but a maximum interest rate. So what I'm finding most common is that they'll use a prime, like a Wall Street Journal prime plus a certain number. So like prime plus 1% or prime plus 1.5%. So, right now prime is really high in the eights. A year ago, it was much, much, much lower. So it can vary in that respect. These loans can be variable loans, meaning that they will fluctuate as the prime changes. And let's just say you have a prime plus 1 loan, right? You may be paying, if prime right now is 8.25, you may be paying a 9.25% interest rate, which is a little scary and high right now. But it is also variable. So it can go up and it can go down. So it's something to consider at this time. How much higher can it go? We're in a weird spot in the market cycle right now. Can it go higher? Is it going to stay an extra year or two? And then start dropping, kind of got to consider that as you're trying to predict the future. If you're going to compare interest rates and you're going to go over to, say, your local bank and get a commercial loan, they're most likely going to have fixed options for you. And they may have variable options as well. But between the two different loans that I've done a commercial loan and this SBA loan. My commercial loan was a fixed, and it was still pretty comparable. It was in that Wall Street Journal prime plus 1 type. And again, a few years ago, we were in the 3s. So that made it very attractive. And obviously, we're not in the 3s right now. So again, something to consider. So let's talk next about guarantees. So there's going to be certain guarantees that you have. Now, with the SBA, that's one of the advantages of this program. It's a government-backed guarantee. So the government's not going to pay you if you fail, but they will pay the bank back. And there's certain limits on what they will pay back. And it really depends on the size of the loan. I believe it's up to 75% what they will pay the actual lender, like the bank that you work through. So if you default, the bank is going to first and foremost take the property, and then there's a chain of events after that. But in addition to that, any shortcomings, the bank can pull money from the federal government. And that really limits the bank's exposure, meaning that if there's less risk for the bank and the bank is charging I would consider a good interest rate, from their term, not from your term, meaning that they're going to make some good money on you on this deal. It decreases the risk and it increases the reward from the bank's perspective. So it makes this type of loan, if you are new to this industry, very, I guess you shouldn't say very, but relatively attractive or relatively easier to get. So I think this is why this is kind of important for this niche. Is a lot of people who are looking to start their first assisted living, they don't really have this type of experience. You may not want to do this for your second or third. Or really, this is kind of, in my opinion, not a long-term loan. You're going to use this loan to build new construction or to purchase something. And then 2-3 years later, as your prepayment penalty expires, you're going to refinance out. We'll talk about the prepayment penalties and stuff soon, but I consider this kind of a shorter-term loan. I'm not going to hold this loan for the whole 25 years. I don't think that is what this product is best used for, but it is definitely a great product to get started on either your first venture or your next venture. And again, kind of have a several year runway on this type of product before you refinance out. So we talked about guarantees from the federal government to the bank. Now there's also guarantees as the borrower to the bank as well. So whomever is borrowing, whether your entity and personal, above 20% will have to personally guarantee. So if you are purchasing this piece of land and it's in ABC Main Street LLC, whoever owns part of that ABC Main Street is going to have to, well, the actual company itself will personally guarantee. And then whoever are the people are that have more than 20% will have to also sign and personally guarantee. So that is something to consider. And it is something to also consider when you're raising money. Do you give people a certain percentage where they need to guarantee, or do you arrange things where you don't have to do that if you're raising money? So as far as guarantees go, the business will guarantee, there'll be a personal guarantee, but then there's also other things to consider, like collateral, like real property. So in the chain of events, right, you're going to have the business. The business is going to have its own property. It's going to have furniture and things like that. That will be first line of defense that the bank is able to take, right? The business's assets. And then after that, they may schedule real estate. They may ask for you to put up a second position lien on your personal residence or on an investment property that you have. So something to keep in mind as you are working with these kind of numbers, and it will tie into the appraisal, and I'll talk about that next. But it may not be, oh, I'm just going to sign my name and that's it, because it's much easier for the bank to just foreclose on a piece of collateralized property like your personal residence than it is for them to sue you to get the money back, right? One is much easier. They're going to take the path of least resistance. So in the sequence of events, right, their protection is the actual property itself, right? They have a lien against the actual property, but if they take that and it doesn't cover the debt, there's also then after that, they may ask for your own personal property or investment properties as collateral, and they'll want to consider what type of equity you have in that. And then third after that, maybe your actual person, where they'd have to go against you in court. So there's, again, coming back to this idea of like pros and cons, because they will allow a lot of leverage, right? They'll allow, 90% loan to value plus additional money for interest reserves, lease up reserves, construction reserves, FF&E. They'll finance a ton of stuff, which is a huge advantage, but it also puts more liability on you if you fail or if you die. So things to consider there, right? Like there's definitely some strong pros, but there's some strong cons as well. So this goes back to this idea of this appraisal. Okay, so it allows you to have a ton of leverage. I think this option allows the most leverage, the highest loan to value. And when you're so they will lend based on a couple different things. And I guess where I'm trying to go with this is we're tying the appraisal into the guarantee, because the bank, and this is not an SBA rule, but I think it's a pretty common bank rule. The bank will take a certain percentage and they'll say, okay, we will consider whether or not to take additional collateral based on what the appraisal value is, the loan to appraisal. Now, for an example, let's just say that you're gonna borrow, say $2 million. Okay, and the bank will have this appraisal done, and let's just say the whole property was like 1.7 with land and construction, and you're borrowing 300,000 in like lease up reserves and things like that. Okay, so you're gonna borrow 2 million. The appraisal comes back lower than 2 million, right? They're not gonna really give you credit for potentially the 300 grand of interest reserve that you want to borrow. You may borrow like 18 months worth of interest reserves plus 100 grand for furniture and another 50 grand for whatever else, right? They may not give you that credit, and again, it's going to be up to the appraiser how they're going to value everything. But if it's short, then this is where that additional collateral may come into place, right? Because if the value of the future property, it's not even built yet, the future property, when the appraiser looks at the bid and the land and everything and says, okay, well, I think it's going to be worth this, the future value of it, the bank wants to be at a certain loan to appraisal value. Now, if that value is lower than their number, that's when they may come in and say, hey, I'll still do the deal. I'll still lend you that much money, the 2 million in this example, but it appraised at 1.7 and you borrow, 2 million. So I need an extra 300 grand of collateral. They may say, okay, well, what about real estate? And you may have to put a second on your real estate. If you don't have any real estate, or if you don't have enough, another sequence of events may be, they may require you to get an additional life insurance policy that they are a co-signer on to make up some of that difference. So it can be done. It does again allow a ton of leverage, the most leverage that I've seen, but there is, give and take on this. It's not free money. It's not without risk. So just some things to consider as you're going through this stuff. Now let's talk about fees. So SBA will definitely have more fees than going to a local commercial lender. You go to a local commercial bank, you're going to have a 1% origination fee, usually appraisal fee, doc fee, title fee, those kind of stuff. But mostly it's 1% plus a couple grand for these things, plus appraisal, right? The SBA, they're going to do a much higher fee than that. So they have a percentage that you'll pay, and I believe it has a max of $138,000. Because I haven't said this yet, but the SBA 7A, the max loan amount, not the max deal amount, but the max loan amount is $5 million. And whatever percentage that is, that gets you to $138,000. That is what you're looking at paying. So you will clearly for sure have a higher than 1% origination fee, but they don't double dip. And what I mean by that is you don't pay the SBA guarantee fee and pay an origination fee to the bank. The SBA program does not allow banks to take fees if they're using the SBA program. So the actual fee that I'm talking about, this SBA guarantee fee, is not paid to the bank. The bank actually doesn't get an origination fee on this kind of deal, which may be why they're charging higher interest rates. But so they don't get an origination fee. There's the SBA guarantee fee, which goes actually into the SBA program. And again, this is where they're collecting and pooling money. So that if someone does default and they have to pay the bank back for their loss, this is where that money comes from. So SBA fees, let's see here. Let's talk about prepayment. So it's an SBA program, the prepayment penalty. It's not a local bank program. So the SBA actual program, or the prepayment penalty, it's a 3-year, 2-year, and 1 year. So within the first, so 3, 2, 1, and then it's also 5, 3, 1. So if you pay back in year 1, right, then it's a 5% prepayment penalty. If you're in year 2, then it's a 3% penalty. And if you're in year 3, then it is a 1%. So when I say year 3, I really don't mean after 36 months. I really mean like month 25 to month 36, right? So, but after you've hit month 36, then you're done with any prepayment penalty. So that's what it looks like. So again, if you're going to do this and you're going to, buy land and start new construction, you're already a year, then lease up, maybe you're 18 months. It's not that much longer until you're already 2 years into this. So that may be something you are considering doing. Something we're considering doing is, by the time we have finished our phase 1 of our project in Platinum, the new Prairie project, where we're building 4 of them. Phase 1 is gonna be 2 buildings. By the time we finish that, we may be considering paying a 1% prepayment penalty, because we'll be between year 2 and year 3, and then just pay that extra, whatever that 1% is. It's again on the amount of principal that's owed at that time. So if we waited to 36 months in a day, then there's no prepayment penalty. So let's next talk about eligibility. So who can kind of get these loans? So I've said before that, again, it's easier to get because it's guaranteed by the federal government. It takes a lot of the risk off of the bank. So who can get these loans? So again, there's very limited information on, like, from the SBA side, what from the actual government program, what are the requirements. But some of the requirements that I think are common and that my SBA lender is using, for a credit score, they want a minimum of 675. And it's going to be the lowest person in your partnership. And again, if you're married, it's, between the spouse, right? Like, they're going to look at who's the lowest. No one can be under 675. And 675 is not like an amazing credit score. It's definitely not a poor credit score. It's kind of in the fair area. So that's something to consider. If you're looking into this and you have a spouse or a partner, you may just want to ask them. Like, I mean, hopefully you know your spouse, but your partner, you may just want to check on this kind of thing. Another potential thing that may be a deal killer is bankruptcies. And again, and this is not an SBA program thing, right? This is going to be case by case by your local bank, but that is something that they will be considering. So check with your partners, right? Any bankruptcies, anything like that, that may put a road bump into your deal. As far as experience, this kind of section, I believe, is a little bit subjective because the whole program is for new small businesses, owner operated type small businesses, not like I'm going to be a passive investor type small business. So again, we run an assisted living, and it's, part medical, kind of semi-nursing ish, and then business aspect, right? You're managing people, making sales, payroll, managing numbers. So I think there's really two sides to this, right? A kind of medical side and a kind of business side. And again, the SBA does not have requirements on business experience, but your local lender will. So as you're going through this, you may want to stack your resume and show, like, hey, here's my business side, whether you have your own company, whether you worked for a company, here's my management experience, here's some of these things. And I've been told that the business side is weighted a little bit more than the medical experience side. Medical experience, you can hire someone. You can get some training on that relatively easier than, learning to, scheduling and cash flow management and being profitable. And those kind of things are a little bit more harder to learn, the business side, than it is to just bring in, hey, let's hire a manager and bring somebody in. So experience, again, is kind of in that subjective spot, but set yourself up for success when you are applying and they ask for a resume. Really highlight your business and medical experience. And your medical experience may literally be like ADLs, taking care of like your loved one or your, grandma or something like that. Let's see here. Another thing that comes into play is cash. So we talked about that the SBA program will allow a 10% down, and it has to be like of hard cash. It can't be money that you borrowed, right? It has to be from you or from one of your equity partners. So if you are raising money for this program, you can't raise money on debt, right? It's not like you can say, hey, he's going to lend me 200 grand and we're going to put him as a second position loan. That's not going to work, right? That's on the debt side. You can bring the 200 grand in and give him maybe, 18% equity or some random number. And now he doesn't have to personally guarantee potentially. And, now that's hard cash that goes into the down payment. So it has to be actual cash that's coming in. That's not a loan. Another thing to consider is a reserve amount. So this is not a requirement of the SBA program, but I think it's a pretty common requirement that they want to see some type of reserve amount in your bank account. So what I was told is a common number is about 6 months of interest reserves. So if you're financing this project, and again, right, you can even finance all of those interest reserves, but they want to see that you have some cash in the bank to be able to have a little cushion, a little padding. Another thing that they told me is a kind of a win for you as a potential borrower is if you are a spouse or a partnership and one person in that spouse or partnership is still working, has some type of other income, they will consider that an advantage because, again, like if you and your spouse are opening this and it's 18 months before you start making money, they're going to be asking, well, 18 months, where are you getting money for your mortgage and food and everything? But if you have a spouse that still has their job, they know, okay, well, the spouse and their salary is there, they can cover it, and that gives you time to get up and running and be profitable. So that is also something to consider. So that's kind of my overview on this. To wrap this up, I think that, again, I am using SBA on this, and I think it is a good way to go for what we are doing as a kind of 3-year play, right? I want to get this done, stabilized, built, and then I'm going to refinance out. I don't like to have a variable rate. I don't like to have a high rate. Right now it's high, right? So I'm hoping in a couple of years from now, the interest rates are going to start going back down, and that'll be kind of naturally timing with I'm built, I'm stabilized, and now I'm already ready to refinance. So hopefully in a couple of years, I'm gonna do this kind of deal and then refinance back out. I think that I like this deal for what our model is for the luxury memory care mansion. If I was gonna buy, like I wouldn't like this for a small assisted living. I wouldn't like it for an RAL. If I had a 10 bed that was, thin numbers, I think there's some pretty strong, like, I guess risk, right? The interest rates are high. You can potentially, leverage really high. And I don't think that I would put myself in a position where if I had a thin deal that I would want that much leverage and that much risk. I think that this type of deal, there's a ton of potential profit, and we can pay this thing back really quickly and easily. But again, I would be careful about maxing my leverage without reserves, and maybe just bring in a partner for that, or however you want to set this up. Now, my first round of doing this, I had to sell like 2 or 3 rental properties to keep going, right? Like I didn't know what the budget was. I didn't have a coach at that time. And man, my budget blew up and I had to sell rentals to get that going. So if you have some type of backup plan, right? Can you refinance out a rental? Can you sell a rental? Something like that. But I do really like this with this niche and not a long-term play. So I would just be careful of, over leveraging yourself without having those reserves, whether they're liquid or whether you can, potentially refinance or sell something and get them back within a few months. Or just bring in an equity partner, right? I brought in an equity partner, and again, because our deal is going to be 2 phases at 10 million. And again, this program's only goes up to 5, but then that's just phase 1. Then I'll refinance out, move that part of it over to commercial, and then get an SBA loan again for phase 2. So that can be something you do. You can really actually do this with the 2-phase thing as well, especially some of you want to build two houses. You can do that and potentially still maybe even be under the 5 million, probably under the $5 million mark. And by the time you've built one, you're stabilized, you're between year 2 and year 3, you may have enough equity in the real estate and the business that you can literally have no down payment for the second one. So for example, like as we were running through our numbers and sent our pro forma and our numbers to the SBA lender, he's like, well, you have this cash set aside for phase 1. It looks like by the time you're ready to go, based on what current comps are, that you don't need any additional money for phase 2. So I think that's a really strong advantage, because again, I'm going to use SBA, build everything out in phase 1, stabilize myself, refinance out with commercial, and get myself a fixed rate there. And then I'm going to go and get a second, but it's the first, how do I say that? I'm going to get a SBA loan again, or I'll only have one, but I'll get it again for just my phase 2 and have no capital out of pocket for that round. So that's kind of my thoughts on SBA. I've done both. There's clearly pros and cons to both sides, but I think if you can use this tool in the right way that it's clearly an advantage, but I don't think it's a long-term advantage. I would use it for like 3 years and then I would refinance it out.